This episode is brought to you by our Patreon supporters. Become a patron today at patreon.com/intotheportal. Biblical tales of the Old Testament spoke of a great king known as Solomon, whose wisdom handed down by God was like none that any other kingdoms that surrounded his empire had ever seen. The son of King David, the great hero of Hebrew legend, who slayed the mighty giant Goliath and restored order to his realm. David abdicated the throne to his son Solomon around 965 BCE. Despite the many legends, it was the massive wealth of Solomon that was the most well-known throughout the ancient world. His temples were adorned with gold, nearly 13.5 tons per year delivered through trade to his kingdom from a mystical place called Ophir. But where exactly this legendary treasure trove was located is uncertain. The legend of King Solomon's mines is one of biblical archaeology's most prolific mysteries. Where could the legendary lands of Ophir be located? And after Solomon's temple was sacked, what happened to his legendary treasure, including the Ark of the Covenant? Join us on Into the Portal for an ancient legend of biblical proportions and the search for King Solomon's mines.
Hello, and welcome back into the portal. I'm Amaray.
And I'm Andrew McKay.
And we're back with a myth of biblical proportions.
Most definitely we are, yeah.
Getting into it. But before we do, of course, we have our usual housekeeping here. A couple new reviews this week. Thank you so much, people. And this was from the US iTunes, as usual, right? That's like where we get all of our reviews.
We don't have that many Canadian fans. It's all of our American friends. It's
I know.
awesome,
I checked back and there was nothing. But anyways, yeah. So thank you so much to D675, titled "Insightful and Organically Entertaining" with 5 stars.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And it was so funny. They were talking about how they love the intro music.
Awesome.
And they were like, Amber, is that you singing? I was like, oh my gosh.
Doing the wailing voice.
Oh yeah, sorry, I do not have the voice of an angel or singing voice of an angel. But we appreciate that, and we appreciate your comments on how you appreciate our less scripted format. So
yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, appreciate that one, because we do like to just keep it more conversational. And a few people out there, we have had the opposite, right? Like even on YouTube, there's been some comments where it's like, oh, like your banter gets in the way of me learning stuff. And I'm like, but we're just having fun.
Yeah.
You know, like,
it's not a lecture.
No.
So, and that's the reason why we can often interrupt each other too, because like we're both like that, and we'll have like a brilliant idea pop into our heads and we're like, I gotta get it out. I gotta say it, because it is just an organic conversation. So
totally.
We appreciate you recognizing that for sure.
So you get it. Thank you. And then we also had Tim O.B. and I loved this. He says, they hook you from the beginning. So yeah, he's like, he really liked the Clarenville episode we just did recently.
Sweet.
That's an awesome choice. And actually that's a great little segue into something else we wanted to discuss right before we get into it today.
Definitely.
And that is the bonus mini-sode. So Patreon, you guys know we do Patreon. We've had it for a few months now.
Yep.
And December is upon us. It is the season of giving.
Yes.
And we are wanting to give back to all of you guys. So what we want to do is give you a little preview of what we offer on Patreon. So our December mini-sode and our December full episode will both be available for all of you to go and preview.
Yeah.
So the full episode will be available for free for all of you guys for a period of 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So it's just going to give you a chance to jump on there and just see what else we're making to get a little bit closer to some of your favorite creators. Exactly. Besides us, like there's a lot of really cool shows out there too. So
absolutely,
it's just a really fun way to get people to just check it out. It's an awesome platform.
Definitely, like yeah, and we appreciate you guys for listening, and obviously we really appreciate our patrons that are on there already, and yeah, we just want the rest of you to kind of get a taste of what we have to offer.
Exactly.
So it's they'll be leading up to Christmas, and so we're excited about that.
Exactly.
You ready to jump into this?
Yes, let's get into it.
Okay. So, today like Amber said, we're discussing a topic of biblical proportions. And for those of you who were, raised Christian and went to Sunday school, you'll be familiar with the stories of King David and King Solomon. I did not pay attention in Sunday school at all. So I was pretty much unaware, other than you'll hear it in the ether of legend and lore.
Totally. Or even just the classic David and Goliath, right?
Exactly. But yeah, today we're talking about the legendary mines of King Solomon, possibly the wealthiest ruler in all of the ancient world, in all of history, really.
Okay.
So the story of the mines themselves is really a part of fiction. And some of you will be familiar with this because of the novel. It came out in 1885, and it was titled King Solomon's Mines. So this is bestseller. This was like the J.K. Rowling, Sir H.R. Haggard, Sir H. Rider Haggard was his name. So yeah, this guy, this was the most successful novel of its time. He's credited with sort of launching the Lost World literary genre.
That's impressive.
Which is pretty impressive, right? So the story tells of a search of an unexplored region of Africa by a group of adventurers led by a character named Alan Quarterman. And he's looking for his missing brother in the story, and he's a British subject, so it's an English adventure novel. Oh. But this is how the story of the mines kind of was brought into the public consciousness in the 1880s. That's
interesting. I actually didn't know that it was about his brother, a search for the brother. I just thought it was a search for the mines themselves.
Right. So actually, no, I don't think it's the main character's brother. He's contracted to find someone. I
see. Okay.
And there's been several movies made based off the novel now too. We've watched the 1950s version, I believe it was.
It was like 1940s or 50s.
Yeah. Yeah, it was like the first early Technicolor. Yeah. You know what I mean? Totally recommend watching it. It's fascinating. But yeah, so this novel would inspire the search for what people believe to be the very real mines of King Solomon.
So who the heck is this King Solomon dude?
Right. All right. So King Solomon is, of course, this legendary king in the Hebrew Bible. So he was the third king of Israel.
Hebrew is the Old Testament, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Essentially,
just to clarify
so it'd be like the Old Testament would have been translated from ancient Hebrew into, I think it would have been into Greek, and then into.
Oh yeah.
Or would it have been from... I have those notes later on. We'll get to that interpretation and stuff.
All right.
So, but yeah, mentioned in the Hebrew Bible, the third king of Israel, he's said to have ruled this is debated, obviously. It's debated whether or not he was even a real person.
So he's a mythical
or that he existed to the extravagance that he's described as, and maybe just more of a tribal ruler, possibly. Oh. Huh. But he allegedly ruled between the years of 965 BCE and 925 BCE and succeeded his father, none other than King David, the guy who slayed Goliath in the legendary
that's
story.
That's amazing. Right? And just for reference sake for everyone, we just covered the Sea Peoples, and that was at the close of the Bronze Age. So essentially this is happening about 150 to 250 years later.
Yes.
So anyways, just for reference.
Yeah, no, totally. These are the empires that sort of rose up after.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Totally. So same neck of the woods too, right? We're still talking about Mediterranean. We're still talking about the Near East, the Sinai Peninsula, that sort of Fertile Crescent, all of that. So
exactly.
Just to help people orient themselves historically.
Totally. No, definitely. Thank you for pointing that out. So yeah, and he reigned over this region, like Amber just mentioned, excuse me. And it was a super, super prosperous empire. He was definitely one of the most wealthy rulers of this time. Mm-hmm. And one of his greatest achievements was he built multiple temples, but one of them was the first and largest temple in what would basically be, end up being modern-day Israel, to house the legendary Ark of the Covenant, which is, of course, the chest that the Hebrews carried out of Egypt that, contained the Ten Commandments.
During the Exodus, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So that's a pretty significant thing to be, storing in your empire, and this was just one of his many treasures, right?
That's so fascinating. That's such a cool side mystery. We need to do a whole episode on the Ark of the Covenant.
Oh, God, it definitely deserves its own full episode for sure.
For sure, yeah.
Maybe we could even do Raiders of the Lost Ark on a Film Friday.
That'd be cool.
That would actually be kind of cool.
That'd
for
be
like
really
the
fun.
Historical references and...
Okay, it's on the list. It is on the list.
It's on the list. So basically, he amassed this wealth because of trade relationships, and he focused his administration in particular on the ones his father had established before him, and these were relationships with the Phoenicians, like the greatest seafarers of the ancient world. And in particular, this king of the Phoenicians, Hiram the First, was the king of Tyre, which is, I think we mentioned that in the Sea Peoples episode, is essentially like a city. Like
the city of Tyre.
Yeah.
Okay. And that would have been it would have been in Phoenicia. Do you know what part exactly of the Mediterranean that is?
That's just it. It's like the Phoenicians controlled most of the Mediterranean. They also extended into the Levant and into Arabia. So it's kind of, they had massive territory. So it's not really, I don't know exactly where Tyre was.
Has it been excavated, I wonder?
I think I might be... It's so funny, right? Like, harkening back to the Sea Peoples episode, there's so many names and terms, like, it's easy to get twisted around.
Oh, for sure.
But, essentially, this relationship made him super wealthy. They were trading luxury products, importing gold and silver, sandalwood, pearls, ivory, apes and peacocks, and this is all referenced in the Bible, which we'll get to in a second here. But...
I just looked it up. Tyre is actually a part of Lebanon. It's on the coast of Lebanon.
So it's a coastal city. That makes sense, obviously, right?
Yeah,
a port city.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I was confusing it with... Can't remember the name now. Anyway.
Many of the other
locations.
How about Punt?
The city of Punt. Yeah, could have been. Could have been. But basically, this guy, King Solomon, was delivered... I mean, this is the measurements in ancient times. 603 score and 6 talents, or 13.5 tons of gold per year, was the amount said to come into Solomon from these, his ancient trading partners.
13.5 tons per year.
The estimated net worth was in excess of $60 trillion in modern value for King Solomon.
Altogether, you mean? Or every year?
I mean, presumably that's from his... No, that's altogether. And that's just his gold. Like,
so
he obviously had... Exactly, like diamonds and rubies and emeralds and silver. So, I mean, that's a lot of cashish.
That's interesting. And I'm just thinking now, too, obviously, we're at the close of the Bronze Age, in the sort of Dark Ages leading into the Iron Age. Would bronze have been a big component of his wealth as well?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Or at least copper still being a major component in the manufacturing of bronze.
Right.
And that possibly being a major player in his
ability to trade?
Yeah.
Okay.
His trading position or whatever, right?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so... Here's a quote. I believe this is straight from the Old Testament. Yeah, it is. It's from the Book of Kings. So, now the weight of gold that came to Solomon in 1 year was 603 score and 6 talents of gold. Besides that, he had of the merchantmen and of the traffic of the spices and merchants and all the kings of Arabia and all the governors of the country. Basically saying that everybody was shipping their good stuff into Solomon.
Totally. He was the be-all, end-all, apparently, the way it sounds.
Right. And... yeah, so like I said, he succeeded his father David, who ruled over a massive empire, preceding him. And
oh, David.
Yeah, but we of course don't know. We don't know if he was a real person, but if he did, he would have ruled around 1000 BCE. So 45 years before he passed it on to his allegedly favorite son.
Do you know why he abdicated the throne?
Well, he would have been getting pretty old, obviously.
Okay, so it was more like a moral decision to be like, I'm no longer able to rule, therefore.
I don't think that was just it. There's... I didn't read the full Bible for this episode, let's just say that. But there's a lot more there. We could do an entire podcast just on the existence of David and Solomon.
Because I remember, I went to Christian Sunday school too, and I do remember that there were a lot of bad kings and a lot of good kings, and I'm pretty sure that David came about in a time when there was a lot of persecution and a lot of all this stuff with Hebrew-speaking populations and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And then, essentially, he I'm forgetting the nuances of his whole battle with Goliath, but essentially he takes on this giant and becomes king because he defeats it and no one else is able to.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if it's before or after David that there's these other evil kings that are, again, very repressive. And I remember this one story where basically, I don't know if it was I'm thinking King Solomon in my head, but he like threw a bunch of Jews into a pit. And they all did. This is like my sixth, like my 6-year-old memory here when I was sitting in Sunday school being terrified.
See,
by
I don't
the
remember
stories.
any of this stuff at all.
And that wasn't even at Catholic school. That was at like a Christian, like a what's it called, Baptist. So it's not even like putting the fear of God right in you, but it stuck with me. So anyways, I don't know. I wonder if in my little kid mind, if King Solomon would have been the bad one or good one.
If anybody out there listening is like obviously a religious scholar or, just knows more about this than us, because this isn't a religious podcast. We're
freshies.
But reach out to us because we'd like to know. I mean, obviously there's a lot of it's allegorical, right? So like the idea of Goliath, being a giant sent from like a demigod type thing. From I'm picturing from modern day Iran or something, or like enemies of Israel, you know what I mean? And it's like an allegory of like the monster that is the other.
Oh yeah, that could definitely be it. Or it could be even what was that race of giants that they talk about? And like Astonishing Legends has touched on it quite a bit. It's the legends of the... Oh, it's really escaping me. It's a really cool word.
So maybe there was actual giants then.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Well, people think that. Like, I don't know what the basis of legitimacy is for all that, but...
And maybe he really did. So if David was a real person and did that, that's pretty badass.
That would be badass.
But we don't have a lot of evidence to prove that either Solomon or David were real other than their references in the Bible. But there was one thing discovered recently. I'll reference this again later in evidence section, but it was called the Tel Dan Stele.
Okay.
It's basically an inscribed stone that was found in, I believe, Lebanon. I have that down below. I don't have it in this section here. Mm-hmm. But there's an inscription on it that references the house of David in Hebrew.
I see. Okay.
And that's the only discovery outside of the actual text of the Old Testament.
The Tel Dan Stele.
Referencing what they believe to be like the house of David, a.k.a. the kingdom of David.
Okay. So that makes sense.
Maybe he's a real guy.
I think there's something to that. It's interesting, too, because I was just looking into the Danites before we sat down to record this, and we're getting the Tel Dan Stele. I wonder if that has anything to do with the Dan... Anyways, that's a side note, too.
There's a lot of linguistic connections in these
There really
stories.
is. So, like, getting into, like, the actual source of this wealth, though, right? Because, like we said, the mines themselves are of myth. They were first conceived of in a novel. Yeah. So it's not like... And even before that, we get a historic sort of, like, search for these mines. Mm-hmm. But you could even make the argument that it wasn't mined. It was, like, procured through trade and through looting, perhaps. But who knows? Right. But in order to contextualize this wealth, it's important to kind of go back into the trade and the relations of the time, right? Yeah. And of course, again, in the Bible, the Old Testament, we do get reference to none other than the Queen of Sheba.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And so Sheba herself, she is considered a very mysterious historical woman of power. And she has been talked about in quite a few historical records here. So including the Old Testament, so we get the Hebrew Bible and the Muslim Quran. She also actually appears in a lot of paintings in Persian and Turkish traditions, as well as in Kabbalistic treatises, so trades, that type of thing. Right. And then, again, in medieval Christian mystical works. So, yeah, she's a big deal. Yeah. And a lot of the references to her are sort of like she embodies a lot of, like, divine wisdom, and that she is basically what is known as a foreteller of the cult of the Holy Cross. So like the Holy Trinity. So that's interesting.
Because this is obviously pre the birth, like well before the birth of Christ. So
exactly.
That's fascinating. Okay.
Totally. And so it's not really known who she was historically, where she came from. There's references to her in Africa, in Arabia, in Mesopotamia. And then we get her actually coming into Solomon's kingdom. So her and Solomon actually had a bit of a relationship, it looks like. And so it's interesting here. It says here, like I was reading through quite a few sources, trying to ascertain who she actually might have been, and how it's actually quite a difficult question to answer. No one really knows.
Yeah.
But she is a very important figure. And it's actually interesting because it says here that these tales of Solomon and Queen Sheba have provided the founding myths for the modern states of Israel and Ethiopia.
Yeah.
So she is very important when it comes to Ethiopian culture and history.
Definitely.
But that's not the only place that she supposedly may have ruled over. All right, so let's get into it here. So essentially, this Queen Sheba, in the biblical account, she actually goes to Solomon's kingdom, and she is wowed by his, impressive amounts of wealth, wisdom, all this kind of stuff. And she says, allegedly, she proclaimed that to him, your wealth and prosperity far surpasses the report I had heard, which is interesting. So she's, yeah, exactly. Fallen. So essentially, she actually ended up giving Solomon more gold, so about 120 talents of it, along with a whole bunch of precious stones and spices. So lots of gifts, and she is there sort of in a way to establish trade relations with the Phoenicians. And she also kind of got a little hanky-panky with Solomon, it sounds like
As
there.
the legends go. Yeah.
Exactly. I believe there was one legend, actually, that she gave birth to his son after she returned back to her homelands. And then what happened was the son went to visit Solomon when he grew up. And Solomon was, enamored by him and loved him and wanted him to come and rule in his place, and the son actually returned back to Sheba.
Really?
Yeah, he didn't want to stay.
Interesting.
That was just a side myth,
that's interesting because this just popped into my head too. Maybe he would have really latched on to that, if that story is true, to that kid, because he allegedly had 700 wives and 300 concubines. So that's 1,000 women to keep track of.
1,000 plus babies.
Yeah, that's, you're going to have to pick your favorites, I think.
Yeah.
You're tough remembering all those names.
You know why he might have favored this one in particular is because perhaps, as the legend goes, perhaps Queen Sheba was actually responsible for the importation of a lot of this wealth after these relations were established. Obviously, he already had his own sources of wealth beyond that.
Yeah.
But what if he was thinking, we need to monopolize this. We need to make sure we get this, all together. So that when I pass on, we have the conjoined kingdoms of mine and then this other,
in Arabia
Sheba.
or Africa or wherever it was.
Exactly, totally. So essentially, after the queen had established these relations, she's trying to establish trade between the Phoenicians and Solomon. That is established successfully, and she leaves and returns to the lands of Sheba with her retinue. All right, and so essentially, from there comes the mystery of where she went. Where is Sheba? What do we, where is she getting all this wealth and all this spices from and all this kind of stuff?
Totally.
Because I don't think she was from, actually she was from considered the area of Phoenicia, but that's
massive.
That's massive, exactly.
And possibly even extending to, we'll get to later, North and South America, if you believe they traveled as far as they did. So huge empire.
Totally. So yeah, we get so many different areas where it could have been the land of Sheba. Is it in Arabia? Is it in Africa? Could be any of these. So yeah.
It's a real mystery. It is. It's kind of...
It is. And like we said, she's a very important person in the founding of Ethiopia.
Yeah.
And so, actually here, I actually have this quote from the story that I just related here about the son and how essentially, this is interesting here. So it says, King Solomon is delighted with his firstborn son, which probably wasn't the case, but firstborn son that he wants to recognize.
Yeah, sure.
And tries in vain to convince the son, Melanic, to remain in Israel to succeed him as king. However, Melanic chooses to return to the land of Sheba, and Solomon sends the firstborn sons of Israel's elders with his son from Israel to Ethiopia, and the Ark of the Covenant travels with them. So there you get a Ark of the Covenant reference. So perhaps it had already been moved out of his, what was it called? The temple.
The Temple of Solomon, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So a lot of Ethiopians do sort of cling to the myth that Sheba was a part of their heritage, and this is just one aspect of it, though. There's so many different areas of the world where Sheba could have come from.
Yeah.
And different translations of things that kind of make it muddy.
No, they definitely do.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, like there's this text, the Kebra Nagast, it translates to the glory of the kings, the Ethiopian text,
Right.
and that's one of the few things that, well, at least they fall back on to say, here's this evidence, so to speak. The text dates between the 6th and 14th centuries. That's quite a wide range, and it references Queen Sheba as the ruler of Ethiopia.
Okay.
Definitively.
Ooh, and this is the same.
From.
Sorry, this is the same text that myth came from about the sun. So that's all wrapped up in this.
And this is, of course, we'll get to this again later when we talk about the treasures of Solomon, because that's another part of this mystery. But the Ethiopians claim that they have the Ark of the Covenant.
They actually legit claim that?
Yes, they're Orthodox Church.
So everyone else in the world is just looking for nothing that doesn't exist anywhere else, and they're just...
There's lots of people, I think, that claim to have it hidden away in some secret place.
That's BS, man. Why don't you call photos and show us so everyone can just lay it to rest?
I don't know.
Is it because of the mystical powers associated with the Ark?
Possibly. I mean, I don't know, right? Like, it's definitely fascinating because of all these connections to these ancient stories, right? Of Solomon and of Queen Sheba. And I love this stuff. This is like my bread and butter.
So it's called the Glory of the Kings, hey? This Kebra Nagast.
Right.
An important text to the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. That's interesting. So they actually rename Queen Sheba as Makeda. And this text does identify the lands of Sheba as ancient Ethiopia.
Yeah.
Huh. So that's interesting. So that's another mythos, kind of. Definitely.
Because obviously, the question is, where is she from? And is there clues in her visits to where the mines were? Like, obviously some of this trade and wealth is coming from her. She's got to be mining, her empire has to be mining it from somewhere. The Phoenicians have to be getting what they're getting from somewhere. Obviously, Solomon has his own mines as well. But there's got to be some sort of, ultimate source, so to speak. You know what I mean? A lot of people believe that the location of Sheba was actually in present-day Yemen.
Right, okay.
I
came across this too, yeah.
Yeah, it's like it derives from the popular translation of Sheba into the Arabic, into Saba, like the kingdom of Saba.
I see,
which was in, what is now modern-day Yemen. But, the kingdom of Saba was believed to be, let me just see, I've got these notes here. So I don't even know, like, I have this comment here where it says, like, which makes the Ethiopian claims on Queen Sheba a little dubious, if you believe it to be Saba and Yemen. But Ethiopia and Yemen are fairly close.
They are.
Together.
They're literally just on other sides of the...
Like a strait.
Yeah, exactly.
So... And obviously trade was massively extensive. So
you would think that maybe it would have been, I'm just thinking now from a strategic standpoint, it would have been optimal to have both sides of that canal covered, right?
Yeah.
So that way you're basically controlling that. That's a gate. I don't know. That could be really significant, especially if Solomon's got his ships traveling in and out of that sort of strait.
Yeah, totally. But it's like they both have kind of equal claim, you know what I mean? Because we've got the Kebra Nagast in Ethiopia, and then also mentions of the kingdom of Saba in the Hebrew Bible and the Quran as well.
Right.
So obviously it was a real place, and whether or not there was a literal... Because that's the thing, right? Was there a literal Queen Sheba? Or was there an area called that? And there's been misinterpreted through translation.
Totally. Where it's like a anthropomization of the land itself.
Exactly.
Yeah,
so we don't
just like
really
the Jewel of the Nile.
Exactly, right? But anyway, let's get back to Solomon here.
Yeah.
Because he was obviously interacting with Sheba. Whether or not that's going to lead us to where his mines were, we don't know yet, right? Mm-hmm. But we know coming from the Far East, he had wealth coming in, not just from her, but from the Phoenicians too. Trading with the empires of India, acquiring rare spices, jewels, gold from further east. Some say that Sheba is the one who brought him exclusively these spices from the east, and that she showed up in these massive camel caravan routes, which totally reminds me of Cambyses' camel caravan trekking through the desert or whatever.
Totally.
I just love that stuff.
Oh, Cambyses.
But really, they completed most of their trade with the Phoenicians, and whether or not Sheba, like you made that comment just a minute ago, how she was kind of like a bit of a middle
like
woman,
a diplomat, perhaps,
in a way, but maybe just for the Phoenician trade in the Levant and not necessarily coastal trade off of the sea, because Solomon has his own ships. The navy of Tarish is how it was described or whatever, right? But Yeah,
he's got it going on, this guy.
He's got it going on. He really does. And so do the Phoenicians, obviously, right? Like, they were trading all over the map. And this gave Solomon the ability to build not just the Temple of Solomon, housing the Ark of the Covenant, but a total of 6 massive fortresses that were built to secure his trade with the East and the West.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
6 mighty fortresses. Hey, I wonder where all those were stationed.
I know, right?
There.
And obviously they're not, the ruins of all of them aren't left today because of the incursion of the Babylonians, which we'll get to in a second here. Mm-hmm. So this is what we know so far. The Phoenicians are delivering treasures to Solomon from the east and west, so this includes apes, exotic animals, gold, silver, we know all that stuff.
Right.
All right. According to we watched the old classic In Search of series with Nimoy, wheat and oils are what the Phoenicians needed the most.
Oh, interesting.
So that kind of makes sense. I mean, obviously, Solomon's in the area of, like, basically the Fertile Crescent, right?
Yeah.
Farming out the wazoo. Mm-hmm. So these people are traveling around. They're not farmers. They're seafarers. So that makes sense. But was it just food he was trading with them is the question. So possibly copper as well. There's evidence of copper mines in the area that could have been Solomon's and trading that with them so they could make bronze. Mm-hmm. But we don't actually know what exactly they needed from Solomon's kingdom.
That's interesting, though, that you say wheat and oils, because honestly, like in the ancient world, and even today, right, increasingly so, as we probably are going to have like massive grain failures and that type of thing of monocrops and stuff, but the consideration of wheat as gold in itself, because you can eat it. Like, it's a lot more valuable when push comes to shove than some pretty looking metal that you can mold into jewelry or something. So
that's actually a good point too. It's also golden in color.
It is golden, yeah. So, there could be a lot of metaphors and a lot of...
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely more valuable when you're starving to death.
It really is. So. And we're in this time of the Dark Ages, right, where there was a lot of collapses. The Hittites went down, the Mycenaeans went down. Everyone's going down.
Everyone's going down.
Going down, not a good way.
Meet me at the mall. It's going down. God, that's a bad song.
So bad. But anyways, yeah, so if you think about it, that could have been hugely significant and worth trading a lot of really valuable metals and diamonds and jewels and rubies and everything else.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Now, we're coming into one of the most interesting sections of this episode, because all of this wealth was said to, the location, the hub, the mecca of most of this wealth was said to come from a place known as Ophir.
Ophir. Yeah, the alleged lands of gold.
Yeah.
So... yeah, they've never been identified by historians and basically exist solely in legend. But nonetheless, obviously, has fascinated scholars for centuries.
Yeah.
And a lot of people do believe that these mines lie in the hills of the Sinai Peninsula. So
close by.
This is the Anatolia Peninsula, the exact same, it's like modern Turkey into Iraq, all that kind of stuff, right? Or Iraq's a few hop, skips, and jumps away.
Yeah. Bust out the map you got up here, hun.
Sorry, okay.
This is why you put it in here.
I know. Iran. Oh, that's what I was thinking. Iran, not
go.
Iraq.
That's right.
Anyways.
There you go.
But like we mentioned before, so there's never been a specific record of its location, and perhaps Solomon was kind of working jointly with the Phoenician king Hiram in order to sort of acquire these vast quantities of gold. So I'm not even sure, like, who was actually charged with, like, being in charge of these lands of Ophir.
I know,
There's just a mystery ruler. Like, it's not as if Solomon himself laid claim to ruling it.
No, like, clearly these were distant lands. Is why it's so weird, like, that a lot of the people, that a lot of modern scholars think it's so close by. Just because of the nature of how far the Phoenicians would travel for trade, and if it was easy for him to get on his own, why would he bother trading valuable resources like wheat and copper for stuff he could get himself? You know what I mean? So
it's true.
I don't really know about that.
So the idea is that a lot of the source of gold for both of these rulers came from these legendary lands of Ophir.
Yes.
Where has never been identified, but people think it might be on the Sinai Peninsula. Might be.
One of hundreds of possible locations.
Or maybe it's in Utah.
Or maybe it's in Utah.
I don't know. But yeah, so like we mentioned here before, like Hiram, he was the one who ruled Tyre. So this is in Lebanon.
Yes.
Part of the Phoenician Empire. And so it's very strange because like these were some of the best seafaring peoples of this time. So some kind of allude to the idea that perhaps commerce could have extended into the Atlantic and Indian Ocean. So we're going both ways.
Yes.
And perhaps as far as South Africa. So there's a lot going on there. I'm thinking to myself, like, I know coastal travel is a lot more comfortable for people as far as like their safety and having like recognizable landmarks and all this kind of stuff. But if you're going that far south, who's to say you're not going to go that far west too, right? Perhaps.
Potentially.
I don't know.
And if you've got
unknown.
Absolutely, and if you've got massive enough ships, like I'm picturing like Zheng He's like treasure ships.
Yeah, the Phoenician ships.
You could carry some serious stuff in that.
So that again, leads to the idea: is there a connection, ancient, globalized trade network between, say, even the ancient Aztecs?
Oh yeah.
And
we're getting
ancient
back
Egyptians?
into my favorite stuff.
Totally. Pre-Columbian contact people.
Love
so, I'll just briefly mention the idea, because, like, we have this as gold. What if they were trading other things? You get spices, and we've seen evidence of cocaine in Egyptian pharaohs. So maybe there is something to it.
Yeah, potentially.
So, yeah.
But beyond...
Just throwing it out there.
Oh, no, I love it. Love it. That's, like, my favorite stuff to talk about. But of course, the majority... So the lands of Ophir, that has been the word that explorers and adventurers have fixated on. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yet, that word never shows up in the primary source used to search for the wealth of King Solomon, that being the Bible.
Oh.
The Bible, interestingly, never ever mentions mines themselves. It only mentions massive amounts of gold and wealth. It doesn't say where they come from. Presumably, it's mined.
Just that there's big caravans and ships of that type of thing. Okay.
Right. So, just to reiterate again, the Hebrew Bible tells us Solomon regularly used ships how am I phrasing this?
Of
From
a place
the Navy.
called Tarshish.
Yes, a place called Tarshish.
Tarshish.
You're saying it weird. Tarshish. But this is strange. So in the Bible, it actually is Sophir with an S, not Ophir with an O. So
that's annoying.
It's a little bit annoying, but it's kind of just typical when it comes to like ancient translations, right?
Yeah.
So this is what brings us to the point of like we don't know if it's referring to a place, a city, a route. Not an outright location, but a pathway towards one, a person. Like, you could argue a lot of different things for the origins of this word. Let me see here. The European version of the Bible and the Old Testaments, basically, so those are the ones with the S ahead of it.
Sophir. It's not Ophir. It's Sophir.
Oh my God.
Oh my God.
The biblical tales, of course, go on to explain how King David abdicated to his favorite son Solomon. So we get that part in the Bible too, which is, of course, a mix of primary and secondary sources. Like, you can consider a lot of it as primary sources. The first temple was built by him. That's mentioned in the Bible. Okay. The Wailing Wall that we see today in Jerusalem as a source of prayer is sort of the remains of the outer portion of Solomon's temple.
Whoa, I didn't know that.
I didn't know that either. But
that's crazy.
Yeah. Huh. And of course, we know this from the Bible as well, that he built the main temple of Solomon to house the ark, which we don't know where it went to now.
That's cool. Okay.
Right. So the question is, was this all lost in translation? So there's those that believe that the reason the lost mines of Ophir has not been discovered is because the true name has been completely lost. So like the Bible was originally written in Hebrew, translated into Greek, and then translated into Latin, and then translated into multiple other European languages, and including Old English first, and then eventually into English, which is like what Europeans in the 1800s, when this all ramped up, were reading. So it's already been gone through,
so many different stages,
well over 1,000 years of possibly misinterpretation, right?
Exactly.
In Greek, the name Ophir has origins with the word ophis, which means serpent. And the Hebrew word for serpent is saraf. So is it more likely that the location of Ophir is it more likely named, like, can you go with the Greek version or the Hebrew version?
Serpent,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right? And do those tie to places or trade routes or what? We don't know. You know what I mean?
So that kind of reminds me of maybe like a code word for like a river. Like, like kind of like an analogy for like you follow the serpent down, like, like it's like some sort of, like riddle or something.
That's kind of how it sounds, right? There's another part of the riddle too. In the Hebrew Bible, it apparently mentions that round trips there and back to Ophir took 3 years.
Okay.
So that's a bit of a clue. Clearly it's not in Sinai.
No, the Sinai Peninsula, no, that totally
right?
rules
Clearly
out.
it's not in Ethiopia.
No.
That wouldn't take 3 years to get there and back. So, but what would take 3 years?
Maybe traveling to the Far East, maybe traveling to
Maybe
South America,
meeting
Central America.
the Maya or the Aztec.
Totally. That's really
We're getting into the
fascinating.
juicy stuff here, people. We're good. But
yeah.
before we continue, we do have a promo break.
Yeah, this week we are promoting Folklore on the Rocks, which is really cool. They cover legendary monsters, cryptic creatures, the mysterious unknown, and it's all fueled by booze.
Sweet. That's our kind of show.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Today we've got coffee.
We do. Eggnog coffee.
Eggnog coffee.
'Tis the season.
Yes. So yeah, settle in, pour a drink, and get ready for some entertainment from these folks.
Hi there, I'm Logan.
And I'm Lindsay.
And we host the new podcast Folklore on the Rocks, where we talk about folklore and lesser-known creatures, cryptids, and monsters from around the world.
When we say lesser known, we mainly mean that we won't be covering creatures like Bigfoot or Nessie or Chupacabra just because they're discussed so often, and the world just has so many other awesome options to draw from.
Every 2 weeks, we'll be diving deep into the legends and culture that surround a specific creature, and getting a bit tipsy as we do so. But don't worry, we do our research sober.
On the weeks in between, we'll be narrating and discussing folktales. So some will be historical folklore from the regions that our creatures are from, and some will be more like modern folklore, like no sleeps and creepypastas.
You can find out more about us on our website, folkloreontherocks.com, on Facebook and Instagram at Folklore on the Rocks, and Twitter at Folklore Rocks. So come on, grab a drink, join us, and let's dig deep together.
And we're back. So yeah, make sure you guys go check out Folklore on the Rocks.
Cheers.
So now we're getting into kind of the modern surge, so to speak. Not modern, not so modern, because I'm starting off with...
Modern-ish.
Modern-ish. We're starting off with basically the most exciting, most epic European expedition that took place in the 1870s.
Okay.
And this was, of course, predating the publication of the classic novel King Solomon's Mines. So there was a guy by the name of Karl Gottlieb Maul. He was a German explorer, self-proclaimed explorer. He had no formal training or education, but he was given, basically he received a world atlas for his 10th birthday. Showing Africa, at the early stages of the 1800s as essentially just a completely blank slate.
That's so weird.
Can you imagine? Just picture that as a kid.
No.
It's bizarre to think, right? Like, you're looking at this massive piece of land and you're like, what the heck is out there? You don't know.
I don't even know. And now we've got a little artifact. Is that from Africa on the wall there? Or is that from...
Burma.
Burma,
We have
sorry.
a Burmese tribal
Mask.
mask here and a bush knife. Pretty cool artifact.
Pretty neat. Not from Africa, though, I guess.
But, so he was enamored with the idea of adventure, right? And he spent his youth basically consuming everything he could about the exploration of Africa and looking specifically into 16th century Portuguese documents because they were sort of they were the first Europeans to really venture in to Africa before the British, before the Dutch.
The Portuguese.
Stuff
they
like
were
that.
ahead of everyone, Hanks. They were like the first to make it to North America, too.
Yeah, allegedly.
Allegedly.
Right.
Well, not like, you know what I mean.
Unless you
Classic colonial narrative.
Right. Unless you count St. Brendan.
St. Brendan. What about, what was his name? The Chinese guy.
Oh, yeah, Zheng?
Zheng He.
Zheng He. He might have done it, too.
Yeah.
So, where am I at here?
The Portuguese.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, he would discover these Portuguese texts discussing evidence of a discovery that matched up with this place of Ophir, although he wouldn't have known it as that yet. He was basically he knew of the story of Solomon from the Bible. Everyone
Right.
knew that story, but nobody knew of it as mines yet because the novel hadn't come out yet. He was looking for something that was
Right.
connected to the wealth. whether it was mines or the kingdom of Sheba was kind of more of like what he was going off of.
The ruins of it. Okay.
Right. So he ends up reading the works by a guy by the name of Tome Lopes, who is kind of best known for sailing with the famous Portuguese explorer Vasco da Gama.
Okay.
And this guy Lopez believed that Ophir was originally the name for Zimbabwe.
What? Where did he get
So
that
he made that
information?
linguistic connection somehow. Of course, we find out later on that this is not accurate,
Anything, yeah,
right?
yeah, it's just...
But this is just a good story. So, and this is during the Renaissance period, right? This was the central hub of African gold trade and this kind of stuff. So he believed that this was a good starting point. So this is South Africa into basically northern South Africa into Zimbabwe. So no experience, no nothing. He's trying to find funding so that he can go over and explore.
Right. And didn't he, appeal to a number of different, publications, newspapers that might be interested in, chronicling his journeys and stuff?
Yes.
But he was kind of a nobody.
He was an absolute nobody, and nobody really wanted to take him on. But he managed to basically, scrape and claw. He worked on a ship as a deckhand, made his way to South Africa on his own. No funding at all.
So all the way to the south, eh?
Yes.
The tip, okay.
He basically... Actually, I don't even know if I included it in this part here because I get into just the good stuff. But yeah, he goes there the first time. He finds he's venturing in. He has some trouble, so he has to turn back. He writes to the head of basically the German Geographic Society or something or other like that, and saying I'm on to something here. He ends up getting some funding, so he's like, sweet. So we'll skip that boring part of the story. So he's got some funding, but he runs into some trouble as he goes out there.
Sorry, just to add to that
okay.
little point there, the publisher guy or editor, whoever he was in contact with, was just basically like, sure, we might run it, we might not, but he sort of loosely stipulated that they would cover his adventure.
Right.
But it wasn't actually guaranteed.
Oh, this was the guy's name, August Peterson. So the
Augie
editor of
Peterson.
Germany's Geographic Research magazine.
Cool.
Yeah. So this guy ends up funding him. He actually ends up giving him 8 years of funding.
Whoa.
Because this is going to take a while, right? He's not in Jeeps and stuff.
That's true.
You're venturing on horseback and camelback and whatever, right? He eventually, after being funded, and he had already almost died multiple times, almost starved, almost died of dehydration. He eventually makes it to the border of Botswana and Zimbabwe. I put 1967. I think it's supposed to be 1867. July 27th of 1867. And he basically comes across a site he knew was a former site of smelting ore to extract gold. So he took some samples, found some gold in the rocks. He discovered this was a massive discovery. But could these have been links to the actual mines of King Solomon? But he thought so, perhaps, right?
Yeah, he's reaching.
Exactly. So he writes back to the magazine. They're all excited, right? But he needs to keep going. So he ends up pushing further, and he just ends up discovering ruins that he believes to be the lost empire of Sheba, the land of Ophir.
Because it's a walled sort of fortress-like thing, and he thinks it's way too sophisticated to be of African manufacture.
Exactly. So this is September 5th. It's now 1871. After years of venturing further and further and further into all this undeveloped terrain, he finds these ruins. So this walled city, and it does match the descriptions of Sophir or Ophir in the stories. None in the Bible, but they do reference Sophir, right? And Solomon's temple. So it was similar, he thought, to the construction of Solomon's temple.
Okay.
So he was thinking that this is inland Phoenician construction and clearly not African, and this was the location of Sheba. This must be where the mines were. Mm-hmm. I don't know. What do you think of this?
I'm just thinking to myself, that's really far away. If he started from the tip of Africa and South Africa there and made his way up about halfway.
It's a long way.
I don't know if that is that's a reach. And we will see that it definitely was a reach.
Right.
But yeah, as far as his his gumption, give him a round of applause for that, because you wouldn't find me traipsing into Africa with nothing but the clothes on my back and, like, you know, a little... He didn't even have proper water sources, like, or resources, right? He just didn't even...
No.
Man, it reminds me of that guy that went looking for the ship in the desert of California, where it's like, dude, just bring some more water. Like,
I know,
what
right?
the heck, man?
I know. It's almost like self-handicapping or something.
Or unless it's just adding to the sort of hero adventure narrative of a lot of these documentaries, right? They sort of rely on this sort of human exceptionalism and these, like, champions of history and whatever else, and
definitely
it's always just like a single man doing it, but
yeah. No. And of course this is the 1870s, so he's uneducated, quote unquote,
right.
So he makes some leaps. He discovers this red wood beam being used to support a massive part of the structure and assumes that it is red cedar, which was not known to exist in the lower Zambezi area, but from Lebanon. And he believed this to be part of that ancient trade and that this was proof. Of course, they find out later that this was not red cedar from Lebanon. And this, in fact, was a medieval era African structure, thousands of years more modern.
So it was an African kingdom.
Yes.
Okay.
And no links at all. But we wanted to mention the story, though, because this was like, he was, I mean, later on crushed. At first he comes back and people believe this to be Ophir.
True.
Right? And the story basically gets stolen by H.R. Haggard, who ends up writing the novel King Solomon's Mines based off of this journey by Mal. Mal gets nothing out of it at all, and he ends up committing suicide.
That's sad. Well, it wasn't even like it was kind of murky, right? He could have committed suicide. It could have just been death by alcoholism. Essentially, they found him. He had fallen out of a second-story window.
Yeah.
That's kind of sad.
Yeah.
Poor guy.
Yeah.
Poor Mal. But, yeah, he did make a lot of assumptions, a lot of sort of classic sort of colonial era scholarly mistakes in not recognizing the abilities of Africans themselves, right? That's a very racist narrative if you think about it. The
Typical
fact that
of the times.
just taking away it's exactly like almost like the ancient aliens hypothesis, right? Where it's like it's taking away all of the ability and all of the amazingness of the humans that were responsible for these achievements and just giving credit to someone else entirely.
Absolutely.
Kind of thing.
Totally.
Yeah.
I mean, I mean, that was one aspect of the pre-Columbian contact episodes we did that we chose not to focus on West Africa, but that could have been a full episode, like West African kingdoms being capable of making it transatlantic trade, and those are possibly the influence of the Olmec heads and stuff like that, right? Super advanced civilizations.
Totally, yeah. And it's interesting too, they're so advanced, and then the methods that this guy, Mal, was using were, like you said, like not very advanced, not very sophisticated. He literally just did a visual comparative of the wood. He didn't even do like an analysis of sorts or anything, right? It was just literally like, compare one piece of wood to the other. This looks like red cedar to me. Yes, it is. Okay. Perfect.
And finds evidence of smelting, connects it to like way more ancient mining than when
right. I guess carbon dating wasn't a thing back then.
No, it wasn't yet. So, I mean, in fairness to him, he obviously found something that was really significant because he didn't realize how significant it was. He would end up changing the way people viewed ancient African civilizations.
That's actually hugely significant.
Right? So he made a huge impact, just not in the way he expected to.
True, yeah. It's almost like the classic case of like the researcher or the explorer going out and then finding something and just ascribing it to their theory that they've already developed. Classic mistake, right?
Classic mistake. But classic colonial anthropology.
Yeah, and it continues on to this day, right? In sort of like these pseudo-enlightened forms of archaeology, perhaps. But anyways,
right. So
that's a side note.
So the mine's not there.
The mine isn't there. So where the heck are they? If they did exist at all. And obviously, ton of speculation. There's been suggestions from all over the world. Africa is a huge one. Mediterranean, of course, we already talked about the Sinai Peninsula. We got Sumatra, the Gold Coast, so like the Côte d'Or, as well as even like North America. So that's getting...
Well, North and South America.
North and South America, sorry. Just the Americas.
The Americas,
general. But many historians and archaeologists continue to believe that all of the gold that was reaped in Egypt and other cities such as Ur, which was of southern Mesopotamia, now modern-day Iraq, had their gold sourced from trade. So this would have come from other cultures, so such as the Sumerians, such as maybe the people of Mesopotamia, all this kind of stuff. It was interesting, actually. Ur is such a weird name. It's just U-R.
Yeah.
And I hadn't even actually come across this until just now. And it's interesting because it actually has another biblical reference in relation to Abraham. And he was, apparently he took his disciples and left Ur and founded the lands of Canaan, which we discussed in the Sea Peoples episode, the Canaanites.
Right.
Yeah, so that's a little side note there.
This is actually so fitting that we're doing this episode post Sea Peoples, because this is the next era.
Totally.
That's so weird how it fell into place that way.
I kind of want to do another episode following along, like maybe 100 years after this.
Yeah.
We should find a
just
cool
do a
myth.
series working our way up through into the medieval period, and then the birth of Christ and beyond.
Let's do it. Okay, we're doing it.
Yeah, cool.
But anyways, yeah, so the lands of Canaan, Ur, all the stuff. But anyways, getting back to like where the actual location of these mines could have maybe been. All right, so of course, Africa. Africa.
Yes.
So, yeah, the north. There's lots of known gold deposits that were used in antiquity and beyond. So ancient Egyptians obviously are known for their plentiful gold artifacts, all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It's said that their production was actually so extensive that it approached a monopoly for several thousand years. So we're talking like from like probably about
3500 BC type deal.
Oh, I was even thinking later, or sorry,
okay.
earlier than
Earlier.
that. So like probably like 6,000 or 5,000 BCE all the way up to like now, right? So like
Ancient.
900. Well, yeah, it says several thousand years, so it's not just 1,000 years.
Well, the Berbers were traveling around 8000 BC, so
Yeah,
knows?
I don't know. There's another suggestion here that is related to this lost city of Punt. And it says here that, okay, so by the 3rd millennium BC, Egyptian merchants were exploring a lot of the sort of African coastline and Arabian coast. So this is like in the east.
Okay.
And it says here that this now lost city of Punt, or Punt, I don't know. It was a major trading center that offered a lot of gold, rare spices. So it was almost like a junction, and it's believed to be what is now Somalia.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but it's interesting because Egyptian texts describe this land, so Punt or Punt or whatever,
Yeah.
as literally the land of the gods because of its
Really?
wealth and resources. So that comes into question, like, okay, was this just like a center for everything to come in, or was this an actual primary source of these materials?
Right. And the location's never been confirmed.
Never
so very
been
much
confirmed.
like Ophir.
Exactly.
Is that Ophir?
I don't
Is
know.
that just another name?
I don't know if
for
that would
the
take
place?
3 years, though, to sail. Anyways, I don't want to get hung up on those tiny little details, but it is important, right, to think, like...
But that's just it. That's like the translation issue. Does like 3
Yeah.
years? Was it actually like 3 months?
Oh, true, actually.
Right. Was it 3 days? And somebody like, it was a typo?
Yeah.
a scribe-o? You know what I mean? Like,
Scribo. Whoopsies.
yeah.
Where's my, it's a whiteout.
Yeah, the whiteout would be just like tossing the scribe into a flaming pit or something.
So maybe, yeah, exactly that. Could this have been Ophir, but it's just another misnomer, another, I don't even know, interpretation or name. There's multiple names for the same thing, even in the English language.
Definitely.
But another suggestion is that perhaps Solomon could have like reopened or just like intensified the production in existing mines that were used by Egypt or other North African kingdoms. So this is the waning of Egyptian prowess
Yes.
in the Mediterranean and at this time.
Absolutely.
So maybe perhaps they had simply abandoned a lot of this stuff, and
I feel like that could account for some of the wealth.
yeah, probably
Yeah.
not all of it, probably not all. And so, yeah, I don't know. There's others that say that there's another location that could have been in Tunisia.
Okay.
So that's another really, and that's a whole other nut right there. There's so many different places. It kind of reminds me of, not the Lost Ark of the Covenant. What's that one? The gold pit, the money pit.
Oh, like with the
Oak Island.
Oak Island, and with
Yeah.
like the possible Holy Grail.
The Grail, right. So, like, the Grail has been rumored to be in so many different locations
Yeah.
around the world. This definitely reminds me of the same time.
Absolutely. Absolutely
mystery,
does.
I
No,
guess.
for sure. It's kind of funny, right?
Yeah.
So Asia is another possible location of the mines.
Okay.
So moving further east.
Into the
So of
east.
course they were trading with massive Eastern empires
Mm-hmm.
that were extremely wealthy, but who could these people have been that they were mining these massive amounts of gold. I kind of came across, I'd never heard of them before, the ancient Dravidians. So these are basically ancient peoples of southern India and the islands of the South Indian continent, subcontinent. Basically, they may have established mines all over that area and as far as South Africa. Like, basically, these were ancient seafaring Hindus who, like, an advanced ancient Hindu population that could have possibly established their own mines.
Yeah, okay. Because they would have traveled along the east coast of Africa, along, like, past Madagascar.
Yeah.
We even had that one reference in one episode where it was like there could have been that landmass that was there that just sunk into the... And that was reported to be a land of extreme wealth, too. So,
Could Ophir have been an island? Now it's lost forever.
a lost continent
Oh, that's cool. I
in
like
the
that.
Indian Ocean.
We need to write a book. We need to, like, convert some of these into some stories, you know what I'm saying? But yeah, the Dravidians were definitely, now we know, looking into paleo anthropology and stuff like that they were known for their gold, ivory, and other sort of precious things, gemstones and stuff like that. So extremely wealthy and very much adorned in the same way that Solomon was in his temple. So historians these days basically support the idea that certain words from these areas have common roots in origin in the Hebrew Bible. Let me just see here. What was an example of one of them? Oh my goodness, and I don't think I even included it here. But, okay, there was another claim in 1887 that there's links between the Coptic name for India as Sophir to the Indian river Cophen, Cophen.
Oh, we got a river here. What if this is a serpent?
Okay, so exactly, that's a metaphor for that. But there's also just these linguistic connections.
Yeah.
So we don't know. So the Coptic name for India is Sophir. Okay, so the reference in the Bible is Sophir, not Ophir.
Right.
Does that mean that these mines are
In
India, or does it mean that they're in South Africa mined by the ancient Indians or Dravidians? We don't know.
That's actually, and that would be very strategic to have your mine situated in an area that is far away, not far away, but far enough away from your most populous areas in case someone came to attack. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like, why are you attacking here? Just go over and get the mine.
Totally, right?
You know what I mean? That's interesting.
Yeah.
It would have been great, just for security purposes, I guess.
Absolutely. And there's other proof of them definitely being in South Africa, too, like in ancient times. So there's legacies of this empire that can be found in place names. So Natal is a location in South Africa. Oh my gosh, I'm going to butcher this. Do you want to give that a go? Mpumalanga,
Yeah, that's good.
near the Swaziland border in South Africa, allegedly has roots in Hindu origin.
Okay.
God, I find that to be totally fascinating. There's also over 20,000 ancient stone ruins scattered throughout the mountains in South Africa that are possibly, not just from, they're from people around the area, right? There's a lot of seafaring groups.
Right.
So, I don't know. I find that to be interesting from a linguistic perspective.
20,000 ancient stone ruins. So, like, ruins of, like, buildings?
Just, of civilization.
Civilizations, yeah.
Yeah.
I like that.
What do you make of that? What do you make of it possibly being... Because that's close by. I guess that could be... Would that be 3 years, though?
I don't know.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Would it take 3 years to sail that far?
You get a little turned around. You never know.
But you've got land to follow, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
so,
that's true.
I don't know. Of course, we're coming to the most exciting of them all.
Yeah. And the most outlandish, I would say. But I'm not going to rule it out.
And that would be the idea that the Phoenicians could have been trading with peoples in the Americas. That being the gold mines of the ancient Aztec and Maya. So there are, of course, those who believe the ancient Phoenicians made it this far. And there's literally, like, every century there were new theories of how the Phoenicians could have made it. There's, like, different legends. There's even ones linked to Mormonism. And basically the ancient Israelites coming to North America.
Crazy.
And leaving behind the relics that would eventually be found.
By, what's his name?
Oh
Founder?
gosh, I don't know. I don't know.
We're
We're not getting into Mormonism today. But there have been ancient Hebrew inscriptions found in rocks all over the U.S. There's links between, like I just said, between Mormonism and visits to the Americas from ancient Israelites. Some people even think that some of the lost tribes of Israel might have made their way over to North America, South America.
Like during the Exodus, or like?
Well, this would have been post Solomon. So after the Babylonian invasion, which we'll get to in a second here. I believe. Or did we skip over it? I can't remember.
Oh, those Babylonians keep popping up, eh?
Yeah, so like there's tons of people who believe this, like, including a lot of the Spanish, who were kind of of course, like in the modern colonization of South America, they were the first ones there, seeing other artifacts that predated them. And this guy, Benito Arias Montana, he was a Spanish Orientalist and basically an editor of a version of the Catholic Bible. He was around in the area, oh gosh, I don't have the date here. It was like 15 something is when he was born. So this was like early stages of Spanish conquest. He believed the Peruvians were the ancient descendants of the Ophir tribes.
Peruvians?
Weird, right?
Okay.
And he believed that the Yucatan province shared a name with the father of Ophir, Loctan. I don't even, like, you know what I mean? Like, these are just how legends and stories have been morphed over 1,000 years, and now here he is in 15 whatever, interpreting it how he will.
I love this guy's described as a Spanish Orientalist. Which, if you've ever read Edward Said's Orientalism, you'll have a much better understanding of what that term is. But that's interesting.
Do you want to give it a little bit of a description?
Oh, well, oh my gosh. Off the top of my head, it's just like the idea that it's basically like the exoticization of foreign cultures to the extent that you believe you're an expert, but you don't really know anything. It's kind of like the really layman's version of that. And Edward Said says it a lot more brilliantly, but I would recommend reading his book, even though it's one of those ones, hey, like you read it too when we were in university.
Way back, I'd have to brush up again, but...
Yeah, but he just makes a really scathing critique of colonial types of... cultural anthropology and that type of thing, and archaeology.
Yeah. So, I don't know, what do you make of this? Like, obviously we know that the Aztecs and the Maya had massive amounts of gold. They mined a lot of gold.
And they weren't really the type that were the ocean-faring type, right? So it would have been like east to west, right?
Yeah.
A movement, and then, I don't know.
But it's like, why trade gold, though? Like, I know it's important, but that seems like such a long way to go with a heavy cargo.
Yeah. Well, they were doing it in the 1500s, so it's not to say that it wouldn't be unheard of. Just the prestige of it, right?
Yeah.
To say that you were able to bring these types of ornate artifacts back. And to me, in my mind, like, it's interesting how Solomon, I guess it just comes from a point of scarcity, right? Like, what do you not have? Obviously, he was in the Fertile Crescent, so he has all of the food he could possibly need and those types of supplies. So he's just looking for ways to sort of bulk up his sort of pomp and like, you know what I mean? His image is kind of what I would interpret for all these like gold and riches and all this like concentration of wealth type of thing. But as far as like the idea of a connection to the Americas, I'm still struggling with that one, because I indirectly through trade with Phoenicians, sure, I would love to look at more information regarding the technology of their ships and how that would compare to the ancient Chinese junks, and if there could be even what if the ancient Chinese were the ones actually accomplishing this, and then they had only gone to, say, the Orient, to China and stuff. Like,
and we're trading with them.
Exactly. And so it was initially sourced from... You just never know,
Well,
right?
if you think they're trading with southern Indians, then that would make sense. Like, they would have Eastern trade with the peoples of China and those... And, right? Like, yeah, we need to do another pre-Columbian contact episode just on the Phoenicians.
Totally.
I think
Yeah.
that needs to be a focus for sure. Because there's so much to mention, including things like, Mystery Hill, that strange structure in New Hampshire.
Oh, yeah.
That's possibly linked to the Phoenicians or the Minoans, things like that. But I just love this theory, though, because if we're looking for places where we know there was massive amounts of gold, where they could have gold to spare, if they had, because they didn't grow wheat and they didn't grow saffron or spices coming from the east,
Right.
so these would have been super exotic and like crazy things for the ancient Maya and Aztec, and they would have been willing to give up gold for sure. The question is I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I love it, but I don't know.
I'm just getting excited.
We have a section here that's actually honestly kind of a duplicate, talking about just like getting into the evidence of King David and Solomon in general, but we've kind of already touched on it, like the Tel Dan inscription talking about King David, and obviously the references to Sheba and the kingdom of Saba as a real place, that link to Sheba, Sheba's link to Solomon. So we have that as allegedly like evidence, so to speak, of Solomon, but nothing direct. We're pretty much going off the Old Testament, and that's what people have been doing for hundreds of years. Literally, Old Testament, map, compass, water bottle, trekking into wherever the heck you think the mines might be. Which I think is just so cool.
I think that's amazing.
You know what I mean?
It's a lot of faith.
Absolutely. Modern day, like super modern day, not Karl Mao, there have been mines found in modern day Jordan that are definitively copper mines. And people now do believe, archaeologists believe, that these are part of King Solomon's ancient mines, and that it very well could have been copper as his main bargaining chip in trade.
Okay.
Because tin was mined in the British Isles and other places. Copper could be found elsewhere, but there was lots of places that the Phoenicians had control over where copper wasn't readily available. And they still needed to make bronze. Even though we're heading into the Iron Age, bronze was super important.
It's a transitioning away. It's like, if you want to compare it to today, it's like the transition away from fossil fuels to other forms of free energy.
Exactly. Yeah.
Not free, but
Right.
get in there.
So yeah, they basically discovered this by finding solidified slag. So this was evidence of ancient smelting, which is really cool.
That is really neat.
Yeah.
So there's another part to this mystery too, right? Well, there's a couple different parts. Like, you get the whole mystery of the Ark of the Covenant, the introduction to that.
Yes.
And then you also get the actual, like, what happened to all this amazing amounts of wealth that was attributed to Solomon? This $60 trillion worth of jewels and everything. Like, where is it?
Exactly.
So it's missing, right?
It's missing.
No one knows where.
No one knows. It's so crazy. This is possibly the greatest lost treasure ever in the history. I mean, definitely the Ark of the Covenant would be on just historical grounds alone, religious grounds alone.
Imagine, eh?
But
there was that one guy that claimed to have found it, and then just... That really annoyed me, that story. I can't remember his name, but he was basically just like a guy from Utah, wasn't he? And he went over to... Oh, what city did he go to? He was like in Israel or Jerusalem or something, and he ended up doing his own excavation that was completely unlicensed, and he claimed he used a microscopic or scope thing that he used because he was like a nurse, I think, back in the U.S.
Something like that.
And he used a scope and he saw the Ark of the Covenant, and now they've resealed everything and they've banned him from entering again. And all
but of
this
course,
stuff,
they said that like they had never even heard of him. Like he never took out permits to excavate or anything.
And then you get the Ethiopian side of it, where they claim they have it. And like you mentioned, they have guards that are literally trained and don't leave the building their entire life.
Yeah, they're like anointed as like the protectors of the covenant, and they spend their entire lives like in this temple.
I wonder if they get to see it.
Oh, I think they're like the only ones who do.
Really?
And they're like, unless they're just, oh man, that would suck. You don't even get to see it. You just have to like stand outside the door.
Yeah.
You don't even know if it's in there.
What if there's nothing?
Yeah.
What
But it wasn't just the Ark. So like golden musical instruments that known as like the tabernacle, which is linked to Mormonism.
Oh, okay.
The gold plates of Mormonism or whatever. And obviously just mass amounts of jewels and things like that. Mm-hmm. But alas, 589 BCE. The Babylonians, under the rule of King Nebuchadnezzar. Give it a go. Give it a go.
Nebuchadnezzar.
Okay. The second. He laid siege to Jerusalem. So this was basically this ended up in the destruction of the city and of Solomon's temple, and this was in the summer of 587. And it is said at this point Solomon's treasures disappeared forever, never to be seen again.
Dispersed to the winds?
Were they just raided by individual, parts of the Babylonian forces and taken wherever? I don't know. There's people that believe the treasures are hidden in all kinds of places all over the world. They could be close by. They could be as far away as... In the lands of Israel,
Babylonia.
That's right.
That's this little point here that says other parts of the treasure were delivered into the hands of the angels Shamshiel, Michael, Gabriel, and perhaps Sariel. Angels.
Yeah.
So
as described in the Bible. Right?
Interesting. Like I'm thinking like Archangel Gabriel, isn't that kind of the guy with the little tutti frutti trumpet or something. Doesn't he have a
The
trumpet?
Tutti Frutti Trumpet Angel?
I don't know. He likes to toot away on it.
I don't know, maybe. This is why we need a biblical scholar to reach out to us here.
I think I'm thinking of that Angels and Demons movie, right? Remember where he's like this Gabriel, he's actually like a dark angel and like he's like totally corrupted by the end of the movie and he's like trying to kill them.
Okay.
Is that Angels and Demons or is that another one? I don't know.
Angels and Demons?
I don't know.
Nobody knows. So yeah, you mentioned already. So like yeah, so those are the mysteries. Where did this wealth come from? These epic mines, and if he really was as rich as he was and did have the ark, where is it now?
Where is it?
There's almost nowhere on Earth that hasn't claimed to be the location of the ark, and again, that's kind of the main one. Like you could find all the rubies and gold in the world as a part of Solomon's treasure, none of it would be as significant as finding the Ark of the Covenant.
Nope.
I have a list here of possible places, and some of them are quite crazy.
All right, let's hear
So, the tomb of King Tut. So, in a 1922 picture from the excavation of Tutankhamun's tomb shows the Anubis shrine, which essentially fits almost to a T the description of the Ark of the Covenant.
What?
But shortly after this, photographs of the explanation. Yeah, I don't even know. It's debated. Is this indeed the Ark or not? I don't think it would be.
What do you mean? Like there was an actual object excavated from it as well? Or it was just the situation and the location was fitting of it?
After inspecting the artifact, the dimensions of the Anubis shrine did not match the purported dimensions of the Ark of the Covenant. So it's still left up for debate.
And that's just it too. Like even the appearance of the Ark of the Covenant too, right? Like a lot of people describe it as this amazingly ornate gold gilded box, but then there's other scholars that will say if this box was actually meant to be carried, it could have been quite simple, right? It could have been just like a simple wooden box,
Balsam wood or something like that,
balsam wood perhaps. And then there was that other mention in a documentary we watched just in the last couple of weeks when we were doing research prep for this. And it was describing how in the ruins of, I can't remember where exactly, in this area though, that the ark could have been, there was actually found like a wooden box that would have had like a door inset, and it actually resembles, it's a miniaturized version of the entranceway to Solomon's temple.
What?
And
Cool.
legend has it, I can't remember what it basically was translated to mean like a doorway or entranceway, like an ark, right?
Yeah.
Of the covenant. So it was like basically would have depicted an idol in the middle of it. So like this box would have opened up as almost like a mini like play thing going on where it would have, and it was just literally so people while they were traveling they would have a icon that they could pray to. So it's like a mobile church, so to speak, but in like a little, like, you know, like foot by foot box. And apparently there were more than one of these found.
That's
and so a
really
lot of people are thinking
interesting.
like, wait a second, is the Ark of the Covenant, is that literally just a phrase that means to like hold the covenant? Like, you know what I mean? Like
some sort of a metaphor.
to hold a religious artifact or something. That's me kind of butchering their explanation. It was a few weeks ago and I was like falling asleep when I was watching it.
No, that's interesting though. I never came across that. So
Yeah.
this is another interesting possible location. The Cathedral of Our Lady of Chartres in France. There are people that believe that the Knights Templar found the Ark of the Covenant during their crusades in North Africa. And, and brought it back to France. And it is basically hiding in a secret chamber, Indiana Jones-esque like place in France. That's
Guarded
a
by
crazy
who?
one.
They're just like hidden away. No
Well,
one
I picture
knows?
like, you remember in the third Indiana Jones where he goes to, he's in Italy and they're in the library, but it used to be a cathedral, and then he like smashes the floor. So like nobody knows it's there, but there was like an ancient grave underneath.
Oh, okay.
So anyway, that's like the legend and lore of this cathedral in France.
Cool.
Some people believe it's to be found hidden in the mountains in Jordan, you know, hidden up in the cliffs somewhere in that region. One of the 64 locations designated in the Dead Sea Scrolls that were found in the late 1940s. So that's 64 other possible locations.
Jeez, okay.
Some people claim it to be held in South Africa by the Lemba tribe.
Who the hell are they?
Well,
Just the ark holders?
yeah. Ark holders.
Sure.
We touched on the Ethiopians. They claim that their Orthodox Church has it, right? Like at the Church of Our Lady Mary of Zion in the city, like they claim to have it on the bottom of Lake Tiberias.
I want to see some evidence of this because
and a government storage facility in the oh my gosh, what's it called? Oh my god, the country in Italy, like the Vatican.
Rome. Oh,
Vatican City.
The country in Italy. Rome.
Rome. Vatican City. Some people
Name
believe it's
something
there.
you can fake. A horse.
A horse.
I'm sorry, that's
A city.
That's a bad insider. Okay. All right, so there's lots of locations, and a lot of people are touting it and claiming it, but none of these people are actually like coming up with evidence and photographs and displays and an actual physical object that is the Ark.
Right.
With these 10 commandments. I want to see these 10 commandments.
I know, right?
I
Don't
believe
tell
in
me
none
what
of
to
ya.
do.
They're really more like guidelines.
Yeah, they're more like loose guidelines. Yeah, it's like when you see a speed sign, it's in yellow, not white. It's just a recommendation, you know.
It's just I have a question for you, just to wrap this up here. Like, what is your favorite theory? Like, what do you more ascribe to over others?
Well, my favorite, most fun theory is that the Phoenicians could have made it as far as South America, and that there was this gold trade that way. Maybe because they even believed that the gold was different. It's different gold coming from a different part of the world, you know what I mean? But most likely, I feel like the mines were never in one location. I feel like Ophir morphed into that term just like Queen Sheba might have as well.
Yeah.
And that this wealth came from all over. His own mines, possibly in North Africa, taking over ancient Egyptian mines, copper trade coming from multiple sources around modern day Europe and the Near East. I do like the ancient Indian connection because we do know that they had gold. I think more localized trade makes the most sense for it.
Yeah.
When it comes to the Ark, my favorite theory is that it is still hiding in some unknown cave in the mountains somewhere in the Middle East.
Okay.
I feel like that is
just like in the mountain with that guy that went looking for it. That was like
hiding somewhere, stored into some secret, hard to reach crevice, and is left to be found.
What if the Nazis have it?
They definitely went looking for it. That's hence the first Indiana Jones movie.
Yeah, right.
They thought it had special powers they could harness, right?
Well, this has been really fun.
What's your favorite theory?
I don't really have a favorite per se. I do agree with the idea that it is most likely that exactly that lands of Ophir would have been. It's just an amalgamation of lands of the gods, lands of abundance, right? It's the same thing as, say, the lands of paradise or Eden or something. You know what I mean? Like it's all just it's a mythical place that people can hold in their heads as like the idealized form, but then it's actually the reality. Yeah, it would have been so difficult to maintain your legitimacy as an ancient ruler. So stuff like this would have been hugely important and significant, right?
Yeah.
Just to maintain that. Not to say that he necessarily needed that per se, but the idea that this man knows of this mythical place that is providing abundance and wealth for all of us as his subjects. Right. That's a very big mythos and a very powerful thing to carry around and think, you know? Like, absolutely. So I just love the story. I love the narratives. I love going down each rabbit hole. I hate it when you get to a dead end. That's my least. Yeah. But yeah, no, this has been so much fun. I thank you because you did so much work for this episode and I appreciate it.
I had a lot of fun researching for this one. I mean, we love our ancient mysteries.
And now I've got ideas for about like 5 to 7 more episodes.
Awesome. So again, thank you guys so much for listening to this episode, and we want to hear what you guys think. So where do you think the lands of Ophir were or could still be? Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on the Ark of the Covenant?
Yeah, definitely. Next week for Film Friday, we are covering The Wailing.
Yes.
Just wanted to mention that as well. Anything else to before we wrap it up?
Just a quick reminder, our Patreon bonus episodes will be free for all of you to listen to for about 2 weeks starting. We're thinking it'll be December 15th or 16th. They'll be available.
Yes. So head to patreon.com/intotheportal, or you can just go to intotheportal.com. Our link is on there. Mm-hmm. And go catch up on the blogs and stuff too if you guys haven't been on the website for a little while.
Bored on your lunch break? Just go peek at the blog.
Absolutely.
That's fun.
So yeah, looking forward to all of that good stuff, and we'll see you guys again soon.
This was a podcast from the Podfix Network. You can check out more shows like it at podfixnetwork.com.